Ghislaine Maxwell filed an appeal to the Supreme Court asking to overturn her sex trafficking conviction, saying that she was unlawfully prosecuted. House Oversight Chair James Comer subpoenaed her to testify before Congress before her knowledge about the Jeffrey Epstein activities. And Maxwell's attorneys offered to testify with some major conditions, including immunity. They also appealed directly to President Trump and requested clemency. So what are Maxwell's legal arguments and congressional testimony demands, and what are her realistic options moving forward? Here to discuss that and more, we have attorney Matthew Hoffmann with Battle-Born Injury Lawyers. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell was very close to Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, she was his girlfriend, and many are alleging she was convicted for not only helping him groom women, but also is accused and stand convicted of actually participating in some of those acts. So what is she actually arguing now with the Supreme Court appeal?
So her argument is basically the same argument that Epstein would have been making had he, was still been alive, which is this 2007 plea agreement that he entered into for related charges. That was with federal prosecutors in Florida, and it granted blanket immunity to alleged co-conspirators. And then it said the language was including but not limited to, and it named 4 people and didn't name Miss Maxwell. What she's arguing is that including but not limited to included her. And she brings up, what is actually a really good legal argument of, U.S. attorneys in Florida gave immunity on behalf of the United States of America. How can you then turn around in New York and say, well, that doesn't apply to us? We're federal prosecutors, we're acting on behalf of the United States, but that one in Florida doesn't apply to us. And there's a circuit split on that. Half the circuits agree with it, half don't. So she's got a really good argument to the Supreme Court. I don't know if they'll hear it. We'll see. But as far as the congressional thing, yeah, she's making pretty big demands, including immunity from Congress, which will never get granted. That means she could just lie to Congress. But then, the biggest one being, if I do it, I want to do it after all my appeals are exhausted. Well, that could be 5 years, 6 years from now.
Oh.
And if she doesn't get these things, she's just going to plead the 5th because she's got a pending appeal and she doesn't want to have this used against her.
Right. So she's asking for that immunity in part because if she did say something, she could be incriminated, even though she's saying that she has this immunity deal. She has to get that solved first, right?
Exactly. That's
okay.
Exactly right.
We were talking a little bit offline before we came on air, and we were talking about how this has really been politicized now. You mentioned that you don't think Congress is going to give her immunity because she could then lie to them. I have a question. Why not just talk to the victims who are still alive?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I think the answer is calling Maxwell before Congress has more political, capital. It's more grandstanding opportunity, but also you are talking to the source. This is the person who is closest to Epstein. And I think there's a desire politically to kind of close off all the speculation of, was there a client list? Was Epstein blackmailing important people? A lot of big names get named, including President Trump. And I think that's in part why her attorneys are using this opportunity to make it basically impossible to get her to testify before Congress with these conditions. And then saying quite cutely, of course, if her sentence is commuted, if she's pardoned, well, then she'll testify and tell everything you want to hear. And that's basically an appeal to President Trump. Now, I think that's possible. I think you could see a commutation of her sentence, different from a pardon. If your sentence is commuted, you're still guilty, but you're just done with your sentence. And if that happened, then she'd have to go back to England and we never have to see her again.
But is there any fear from President Trump or his administration that if he was to basically let her go or let her have a lighter sentence, that his base would be upset? I mean, they've been pretty invested into this story.
And that's the double-edged sword here. Which it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you grant the commutation, which is really the only one that would work, that way she testifies before Congress and she says, yes, here's what really happened, and we get, she spills the tea, that's fine, but then she got off the hook. Conversely, everyone's going to say, well, she's just lying and you can't believe anything she said, and the conspiracy continues. So I don't know. I think her best case for credibility purposes is to win on appeal. But the Supreme Court, they get less than 1% of the cases they hear. They actually before them. And I don't know if anybody wants to touch this case. We're talking about, very salacious crimes. So there's a lot of political maneuvering, legal maneuvering here. It is an interesting legal situation. I don't know how it's going to be resolved is my answer, but there are a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, a lot of people watching this one for so many obvious reasons. One being that we're talking about children here being abused, and a lot of people are invested in trying to see this outcome play out and demanding justice and for those files to be released. We'll have to wait and see if that happens too. Thank you so much, Matt. I know it's a lot. It's
a lot.
A lot of layers to this thing. Thank you so much. Well, if you have any legal questions that you want Matt to answer, you can always email us at breakingdownthelaw@news3lv.com.